The Blackstone Tower cut through the morning fog like a blade, its glass skin reflecting the city's heartbeat back at itself from the sidewalk. It looked like power incarnate, sleek, soulless, and unreachable. But inside, especially on the 49th floor, chaos had once again bloomed like a bruise. Dana Rivera stood outside the executive suite, her stilettos silent on the polished floor, an envelope clenched between the manicured fingers. Inside that envelope was the resignation letter from Julian Blackstone's latest casualty, the 14th executive assistant in 8 months. This one had lasted 3 weeks, which, in Julian's world, practically counted as tenure. Dana sighed, pushed the mahogany door open, and braced herself. Julian didn't look up. He was behind his desk, backlit by the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed a smog-softened skyline. His attention was fixed on a tablet, stylus in hand, scribbling over a contract like it had personally insulted him. "She's gone," Dana said simply, dropping the envelope on his desk like a white flag. His hand froze mid-stroke. Which one was this? Kayla. Blonde. Georgetown. Crier. How long? 3 weeks. She set a calendar alert every morning that said, "Today I don't cry." That failed by week 2. Julian finally looked up. His steel-gray eyes were emotionless, but Dana had worked with him long enough to detect the flicker of annoyance beneath the surface. Or maybe it was boredom. What did she say in her letter? Dana opened the envelope and read flatly, quote, "Mr. Blackstone's working environment is psychologically unsustainable. I have developed chronic heartburn, a tick in my left eye, and I now flinch when I hear the word memo. I wish him well and suggest therapy." Julian smirked. "Barely. Chronic heartburn. How original. You're running out of people willing to sit at that desk, Julian. Hire better people." Dana didn't respond. She simply turned and walked out, already exhausted by the idea of recruiting a replacement. Again, across town, in a cramped, paint-chipped apartment that still smelled vaguely of takeout and desperation, Collie Brooks was trying to keep her laptop from overheating while eating cereal. From a measuring cup, a freelance editor by night, a waitress by necessity, she scanned her inbox filled with a fresh round of rejection emails. She clicked on one from Lighthouse Literary. "We appreciate your submission, but we're going in a different direction." "Sure," she muttered, away from rent paying. Her phone buzzed. "Rachel, you alive?" "Barely. Why?" "There's a job opening that screams your name." "If it screams, it's probably because it's being tortured." Executive assistant. Blackstone Industries. Collie snorted milk. Julian Blackstone, the corporate dragon? He eats assistants for breakfast. That's a rumor. No, the rumor is that he fired one for ordering the wrong kind of binder clips. You need a job. He needs an assistant. It's fate. Also, I dare you. Collie paused. She had been dared into worse. This job would pay enough to cover rent and maybe even buy cereal that came in a box. A click later, she was staring at the job listing. Minimal description, maximum salary. She submitted her resume on impulse, half laughing. 3 hours later, her phone rang. A clipped voice. "Ms. Brooks, this is Dana Rivera from Blackstone Industries. Mr. Blackstone would like to meet you tomorrow at 9 a.m. She nearly dropped her phone the next morning, dressed in her best Goodwill blazer and not-so-best Payless heels. Collie stood in the Blackstone lobby, hard hammering. The receptionist barely looked up before motioning her to the elevators. The top floor felt like another planet. Sleek, silver, sterile. She tried to channel calm. That ended the moment she bumped into a side table, sending the CEO's espresso flying in a majestic arc. That landed across his crisp, white shirt. "Oh my God," she breathed. Julian Blackstone stared at her, not at the stain, at her, like she'd just shattered something sacred. I mean, she fumbled for tissues from her purse, finding a crumpled napkin with a lipstick print instead. He didn't say a word. This was it. Her interview was over. She was going to be escorted out by security. "Maybe 5 for the coffee. I guess I'm not getting the job, huh?" she mumbled. Julian looked at the ruined espresso, the napkin, and then back at her. Something flickered in his eyes, curiosity, amusement. "No," he said, turning slowly. "You're not." She blinked. "You already have it." And then he disappeared into his office, leaving her standing in stunned silence, holding a coffee-stained napkin and wondering what the hell just happened. The doors to Julian Blackstone's office closed with a soft click, and Collie Brooks just stood there, her mind spinning. She had ruined his shirt, spilled his espresso, offered him a lipstick-stained napkin, and somehow she was still standing. With a job, she looked down at her own shaking hands, then up at the desk where assistants went to emotionally combust. The chair was pristine. The monitor glowed expectantly, a sleek phone, several blinking lines. Next to it, a small brass plaque, Executive Assistant to Julian Blackstone. Is this a social experiment? She whispered to herself. Before she could sit down, Dana Rivera reappeared, heels clicking, arms folded, one eyebrow raised high enough to suggest disbelief or admiration, possibly both. "You're still breathing," Dana said. "Impressive. I think I blacked out. Did I?" "Just get hired." "You did. Don't celebrate yet." Dana handed her a thick manual. "This is the onboarding handbook. Read it. Memorize it. Eat it if you have to. It includes everything Julian Blackstone despises." "Does it say people in the first line?" Dana smiled. "Page 1. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't hover. Don't guess. Don't assume. Don't interrupt. Don't ever touch his schedule." Colley flipped to a random page and found a bullet point. "Coffee must be black. 110F. Exact. Failure equals verbal execution. This is a hostage situation." Colley muttered, "Welcome to the 49th floor." The rest of the day passed like a fever dream. Colley didn't sit once. She signed NDA letters, filled out HR forms, and received a security badge with her photo looking like she'd just seen a ghost. Which, in a way, she had. Julian emerged only once, walking straight past her without a word, his new shirt as crisp as his scowl. She swore he was wearing the same tie as the man in the portrait, hanging above the fireplace, his father, probably. The resemblance was eerie, sharp jaw, cold eyes, a monument to control. By 6 p.m., the floor was deserted. Colley sat alone at her desk, staring at a screen full of names, acronyms, and deadlines. She tried to log into her computer, but needed a passcode. She tried to ask IT for help, but no one answered the internal line. Finally, she gave up and went for the emergency plan, improvise. She printed the upcoming week's schedule from a backup folder someone had left in a drawer. Then she reorganized it by priority, color-coded, time-optimized, with margin notes. She left it on Julian's desk. Just as she turned to leave, she heard a voice behind her. "You touched my schedule." Julian stood in the doorway like a shadow sharpened by anger, his gray eyes locked onto hers. "I told you not to touch anything. You didn't tell me anything." Colley replied before she could stop herself. "You hired me and then ghosted me for 8 hours. His expression didn't change, and yet, here you are, rearranging things you don't understand. She squared her shoulders. "I do understand. Your original layout had a meeting with Lawrence and Beck overlapping with your quarterly review. If you didn't cancel it, you'd be late, and you hate being late more than you hate small talk, right?" He narrowed his eyes. "You read a week's worth of material in 4 hours. I didn't read it. I scanned it. I noticed patterns. It's kind of a thing I do." Silence, a dangerous one. Then he moved across the room and picked up the folder. His eyes scanned her layout, line by line, color by color. Then he did something shocking. He nodded. "Next time, ask," he said, setting the file down. "You're not here to improvise. You're here to execute." "Got it," she said, but her tone betrayed her. A flick of sarcasm, a flash of heat. Julian's gaze lingered. She expected him to fire her on the spot. Instead, he said, "Be here at 7 a.m. tomorrow." "That early? You said you noticed patterns." "Notice this one. No one lasts here who sleeps in." Colley watched him disappear into his office again, door swinging shut behind him. The moment it clicked closed, she slumped into her chair and exhaled a breath she'd been holding all day. But down the hall, someone else had noticed her. A woman with sharp eyes and a silk scarf stood half hidden by a conference room. She had been watching Colley since the elevator incident, watching her get hired, watching her rearrange Julian's schedule. She pulled out her phone and snapped a picture. Then she sent a text to an unknown number. "She's in, the new one, and she's already poking around." No reply came, just the 3 dots blinking, then gone. Back in her apartment, Colley collapsed on her couch, unaware that someone had marked her. She was too tired to think, too sore to worry, and too stubborn to quit. But somewhere in the cold machinery of Blackstone Industries, someone had started a clock, and it was ticking toward her. It had been 12 days since Colley Brooks began working at Blackstone Industries, and every morning still felt like a dare from the universe. She arrived at 6:50 a.m., 10 minutes early, carrying the coffees, one for herself with extra oat, milk and cinnamon, and one for Julian Blackstone, precisely 110F, black, no lid, no sugar, no mistakes. She measured the temperature twice, not for his benefit, for her own survival. Each day brought a new obstacle course. One morning, the security system crashed and she had to talk her way through to ex-Marines guarding the elevators. Another day, she intercepted an irate client before he reached Julian's office by offering him tickets to a Nick KS game ticket she did not have but managed to acquire by bribing her cousin, who worked the stadium's lighting crew. But today, something was off. Julian had been unusually silent since yesterday's board meeting, where he delivered a brutal but effective takedown of a senior partner who fudged his quarterly numbers. Colley had watched the room freeze as Julian dismantled the man's proposal line by line, his voice cold and calculated like a guillotine descending. No one defended the partner. No one dared. But when Julian returned to his office afterward, he hadn't spoken a word for the rest of the day. And today, the chill hadn't lifted. Colley placed the coffee on his desk at 6:59. Coffee, no poison. You're welcome, she said softly. No reply, just the soft click of keystrokes. She turned to leave, but then paused. You know, silence might be golden, but it's also suspicious. Should I be worried? Julian finally looked up. There was something tight in his expression, more than usual. Something restrained. Worried? He said. Why would you be worried? Because you haven't corrected my grammar all morning. He exhaled a breath that might have been a laugh in a different world. I'm fine. You're lying, she said. He stared at her like she was a riddle written in flame. You're too comfortable here. Or maybe, she said, I'm just not afraid of you anymore. Their eyes locked. There was again that impossible gravity between them, the kind that made Colley forget how to blink before anything else could be said. The intercom buzzed. Dana's voice. Julian, we have a situation, level 14, IT, security breach. You need to see this. He stood abruptly. Come with me. They rode the elevator in silence. When they stepped out onto the 14th floor, chaos greeted them. The IT team huddled around a screen. A masked intrusion had bypassed multiple firewalls. Someone had accessed private board communications and internal server logs. Worse, it appeared to be an inside job. Julian's voice sliced through the panic like a scalpel. Shut it down. Isolate the servers. Log every user ID that accessed the terminal this morning. Colley stood frozen until one of the analysts, a young guy with trembling hands, turned to Julian. Sir, it was her ID. Julian turned slowly. Whose ID? He asked. The analyst glanced nervously at Colley. Brooks 1492. Colley felt like the floor had vanished beneath her. What? No. That's no, I didn't. Julian's voice was quiet. Dangerous. You accessed the board server this morning? No. I didn't touch anything. I used my computer like always, scheduled your call with Myertech, sent that brief to Dana, checked the weather. Julian didn't say anything, just looked at her. The betrayal stung worse than if he'd shouted. She stepped toward him. You really think I'd do this? He didn't answer. The elevator doors closed behind her. An hour later, she was in Dana's office. HR protocol. It's just suspension, Dana said, until we figure it out. Colley nodded numbly, collected her things, and walked out of the tower without looking back. She didn't cry until she was 2 blocks away, not because of the accusation, not because of the job, because he had believed it. That night, as rain fell in sheets against her apartment window, Colley sat in silence, laptop open, hands still, until she remembered something. The email. A week ago, she'd received an anonymous tip, asked him what happened to the last assistant. She hadn't taken it seriously, not then, but now. She opened her inbox, scrolled. The message was gone. Deleted. No trace. She checked her trash. Nothing. No sender. No metadata. But someone had wanted her to look. Someone had known this would happen. Colley stared into the screen as her reflection flickered back at her, and slowly, her jaw set, her shoulders straightened. Julian Blackstone thought he knew her, but this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 3 days passed. 3 long, excruciating, soul-draining days. Colley hadn't heard from Julian, or Dana, or anyone else at Blackstone Industries since the moment she'd walked out with her world in a cardboard box. The box still sat unopened. on her kitchen counter like a tombstone to something she hadn't realized meant everything. She hadn't slept much. When she did, she dreamed of firewalls and flashing red warnings, of Julian's eyes blank, cold, accusing. The man who once told her, "Ask before you touch anything," hadn't even asked her why. But Collie wasn't built to break. She wasn't quitting. She was investigating day by day. She scanned old messages and scoured online forums. By night, she hunted through backdoors in the freelance tech circles she used to edit for. Somewhere in those encrypted layers of corporate code, someone had used her identity. The question was, who and why now? Then, on the fourth morning, her apartment buzzer rang. She opened the door to find Dana Rivera, her trench coat soaked and her heels clicking on the hardwood like a warning. "Don't say anything," Dana said, pushing past her. "Just listen." Collie blinked. "Are you here to officially fire me because coffee would have been nice first?" Dana spun around. Her voice was lower now. "I believe you." Collie's breath caught. "Then why? I couldn't say anything at the office. Not with the board watching Julian like vultures. There's something you need to see." Dana reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "This was anonymously dropped into my inbox last night. Whoever sent it bypassed every internal checkpoint." Collie hesitated, then plugged it into her laptop. A folder popped open. Inside was a video, surveillance footage, grainy, dated, time-stamped 8 months ago. Julian's office dot in the corner of the frame, his former assistant, Erica Vaughn. Collie leaned in. Erica stood behind Julian's desk, typing furiously, then glancing over her shoulder. Then typing again. Another figure entered the room, a man in a suit, not Julian, younger, nervous. Erica handed him something. Flash drive. Collie froze. "That's Parker Keene," Dana whispered. "He was a junior analyst, fired after Julian accused him of leaking proprietary data. He denied everything. Erica took the fall, quit the next day. But she didn't leak the files," Collie murmured. "She sold them." Dana nodded. "And the board hushed it up, claimed Julian's emotional involvement clouded his judgment, used it against him." Collie stared at the screen. "He cared about her," Dana said. "Maybe even loved her, and she used it to bury him." A silence hung between them. Then Collie asked, "Why now? Why frame me?" Dana hesitated. "Because you're getting too close. Because you make him different. And someone at the top doesn't like what that means." A beat, and then bang. The flash drive snapped in two under Dana's heel. "You saw it," she said. "That's all that matters. You destroyed the evidence. I protected you. There are people in that building who'd erase more than your career. Then what do I do?" Dana smiled grimly. "You do what you do best. You stay loud, stay messy, be the chaos they can't predict. And when the moment comes, you show him the truth he forgot to believe in." Hours later, as the clouds gathered over the city and the skyline began to blur in gray rain, Julian Blackstone sat alone in his office. The lights were low, the room unusually silent. He hadn't slept either. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't touched. The coffee Collie used to make him like clockwork. He hadn't stopped thinking about her. She was guilty. She had to be. The system had tracked her ID. The logs were verified. The evidence had aligned it perfectly, and yet, that voice, that look on her face when she said, "You think I'd do this?" Something didn't fit. He opened a file on his screen. The internal access logs, line after line of user activity. He zoomed in on the day in question. Seabrook 1492. Login at 7:00 for Ambit, then something strange. Secretary access at 7:12 a.m., but her terminal was logged inactive. "Impossible," Julian whispered. He tapped into the security feeds, cross-referenced. Timestamps. There it was at 7:12. She was still downstairs, delivering his coffee. A ghost login. Julian stared at the screen, and his blood ran cold. Someone had cloned her access. Collie hadn't betrayed him. He had betrayed her. He slammed his laptop shut and grabbed his coat. 20 blocks away, Collie stood, in front of Blackstone Tower, in the rain, alone, no badge, no access, no plan. But she had something stronger. She had the truth. The security guard didn't want to let her in. Then Julian appeared behind the glass. Their eyes locked. He opened the door. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, water streaming down. Her hair, clothes soaked, eyes fierce. "I didn't do it," she said. "I know," he said softly. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her. Somewhere above them, The lights of the 49th floor flickered. It was no longer about assistant. Its CEO. It was no longer about survival. Now it was about war, and they were finally on the same side. The elevator rose like a coffin being carried skyward. Kali stood beside Julian, silent but vibrating with energy equal parts fury, vindication, and heartbreak. Water dripped from the hem of her coat onto the polished elevator floor. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. Words would have cracked the pressure between them. Julian clenched his fists as the numbers ticked upward. 32, 38, 41. I should have believed you, he finally said. You didn't, she replied, without looking at him. I know. He turned his head toward her, and I've never regret anything more. The elevator dinged. Julian stepped out first, but he didn't lead her to his office. Instead, he veered left, toward a door marked Confidential Archives. He swiped his ID. A biometric scan followed. The heavy door hissed open with a mechanical sigh. Kali had never been here. Few had. This is where I hide what the board doesn't want anyone to see, Julian said, flipping on dim fluorescent lights that buzzed like bees in a jar. Secret files, buried lies. They moved between tall shelves stacked with manila, folders, hard drives, and locked drawers. Julian pulled out a secure laptop and opened the server he'd built. After Erica betrayed him, an offline repository for anything that smelled like betrayal. You were right about the breach, he said, fingers flying across the keys. But someone didn't just frame you, they used you as a test run. For what? He clicked open a folder titled Obsidian Proposal, Queue for Shadow Bids. Kali leaned in. The documents showed several confidential bids Julian had rejected in the past 3 months, projects that would have cost the company its ethical backbone, but generated massive short-term profit. Black market contractors, AI systems with predatory surveillance, private data acquisition through legal gray zones, and every single one of them had been revived behind his back, approved, signed, rooted through his own name. Kali stared at the screen. They've been forging your authorization? Someone on the board is planning a hostile internal takeover. These deals, all of them corrupt, illegal, and if they go through, Blackstone Industries becomes a monster I can't stop. Kali stepped back. You're saying you're not the monster? Julian met her gaze. Not anymore. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. They were in this together now. Not because she forgave him, but because the fight had become bigger than both of them. Julian clicked open an encrypted file labeled Boardroom Roster. Cross Communications. Kali spotted a familiar name at the top. Lawrence Whitaker, Chief Legal Officer. The man who once told Julian to focus on the numbers, not the noise. Below it, a familiar face in a red dress. Erica, Kali whispered. She's back. Julian nodded. She's consulting for Whitaker. They've been working quietly to undermine every division that reports to me directly. A beat of silence, and I handed them everything, Julian said bitterly. I built the walls to keep people out. They tunneled right through me. Kali touched his arm. He flinched, then didn't pull away. Then it's time to light a fire under the boardroom, she said. Julian looked at her. She wasn't afraid. She was furious. What's the plan? Simple, she said, smirking. We go rogue. The next 48 hours were chaos. Kali moved through Blackstone Tower like a ghost with a mission. No badge, no desk, no title, just whispered access through Julian's clearance and a laptop filled with fire. They mapped every unauthorized project, every falsified approval, every communication routed through Erica's false consulting firm, and when Julian confronted Lawrence Whitaker directly in the boardroom, the man laughed. You're paranoid, Whitaker said. You've gone soft, Julian. The moment you brought her into your circle, you lost your edge. She made me sharper, Julian said quietly. She saw what I didn't, what you hid. And what are you going to do? Whitaker smirked. Run to the press with half a theory. You'll crash the company yourself. Julian's eyes flicked to Kali, who stood just outside the boardroom with a camera, streaming. Live. Already did. The screen behind Whitaker lit up every file, every document, every damning email. Hundreds of employees tuned in across divisions. Shareholders, journalists, analysts, all watching. The room exploded in shouting. Whitaker turned red. You leaked internal data. No, Julian said. I exposed criminal activity. He turned to the rest of the board. This is your moment. Clean house, or I walk. And take every division loyal to me with me. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. Then one by one, the board members began voting. Whitaker, suspended. Erica Vaughn, blacklisted. The forged contracts, nullified. Colley, reinstated and promoted. That night, the building emptied slowly, while Julian remained in his office, staring out at the skyline like a man who just survived his own funeral. Colley entered without knocking. He turned, expecting another ward. Instead, she handed him a drink, whiskey, to cubes. "You're welcome," she said, sitting across from him. "I don't deserve that." "No," she agreed, "but I poured it anyway." A long silence. Then, softly, "You didn't just save the company, Julian. You proved you're not your father." He winced. "You read the dossiers. I read you." Another beat. "I meant what I said," he murmured. "You made me sharper. You're the first person who ever made me want to be better." She met his eyes. "Then be better." "I want to try," he said. Colley stood slowly, walked around his desk, sat on the edge and faced him. "I need to know something," she said. "When you thought I betrayed you, did it hurt because you trusted me? Or because you felt something more?" He didn't answer with words. He stood, moved in front of her, slowly, like gravity was pulling them together. "Both," he whispered. Then he kissed her. Not like a CEO claiming power, but like a man who had nearly lost the only person who made him feel human. Her hands threaded into his shirt. His fingers brushed her cheek. And in that moment, the city disappeared. The next morning, Blackstone Tower stood still under an overcast sky, as if even the skyline was holding its breath. Inside, tension simmered beneath every hallway light. No one was speaking above a whisper. Every assistant, intern, and executive waited because they had seen the live stream. They had watched Julian Blackstone call out his board. They had watched him stand beside her. And now, every whisper in the building began and ended with one name: Colley Brooks. She stood outside the elevator on the ground floor, her heart pounding in her throat. Not from nerves, but from purpose. Her outfit wasn't conservative this time. She wore confidence. Her shoulders were back, eyes bright, chin high. The woman who once spilled coffee on a CEO now walked like she could lead an empire. And in a way, she already had. The elevator doors opened at the 49th floor, and every head in the reception area turned. Colley didn't flinch. She walked to the desk that had once felt like a death sentence, and placed her hand on it like it was a throne. Her badge clipped on, her smile calm. A hush spread across the floor like a ripple through glass. Then Julian stepped out of his office. Silence fell heavier than stone. He walked toward her slowly, not as a boss, not as a man in power, but as a man who had nothing to hide. "Good morning," he said, eyes locked on hers. "Is it?" she replied, that spark in her voice already challenging him. "I suppose we'll find out together." She raised a brow. "Any fires to put out?" He stepped closer. "Just one." He turned toward the gathered employees, then higher, because behind them, in the largest conference hall on the 49th floor, the company's full staff had gathered for the emergency all-hands meeting. Reporters had been invited. Shareholders, too. He walked in without notes, without a script. Colley followed. Julian faced the room, his hands clasped. The same man who once led through fear now stood in quiet defiance of it. "Some of you know me as the man who doesn't smile. The man who fires people for blinking wrong. The man who built Blackstone from the ground up without ever letting anyone close. I don't blame you for thinking that. I made it true." The room remained frozen. But yesterday, someone reminded me that building walls doesn't keep you strong, it just keeps you alone. He turned to Colley, standing just behind him, a breath away. 6 months ago, she was a resume buried in 100 others. No experience, no polish, just a smart, clumsy, ridiculously stubborn woman who refused to be afraid of me. A few chuckles broke the tension. She didn't just survive this job, she changed it. She changed me. He turned back to the crowd, and so today, I'm announcing a new position: Chief Culture and Integrity Officer. A role meant to keep people like me in check, to protect the spirit of this company, not just its profit. He paused. "I've asked Colley Brooks to take that role." The room erupted in murmurs. Colley blinked. She hadn't known this part. Julian smiled. She said yes. Then he took a slow step closer to her, pulled something small from his pocket. No velvet box, just simplicity. A ring. One she had once described it, passing a delicate band with a twisted design, like the separate pops braided into one. I know this isn't protocol, he said softly, not for the crowd, but for her. But you've never followed protocol, and I've never needed someone the way I need you. Collie's breath hitched. Julian knelt, not as a performance, not as a symbol of power reversed, but as a man unlearning everything he thought made him strong. Will you marry me? Time held. Still, the woman who had once been seen as disposable now stood at the center of the company, of his world. Collie looked down at him. Tears shimmered but didn't fall. Her hands trembled but her voice didn't. Only if I still get to tell you when you're being a jerk. The room exploded. Laughter, applause, flashbulbs, shouts of joy. Julian rose, slipping the ring onto her finger with fingers steadier than his voice, and when he kissed her, it wasn't just romantic, it was historic, because every person in that room, in that company, in that story they now knew one truth. She wasn't just the secretary who lasted, she was the woman who rewrote the ending. That night, as they walked out of Blackstone Tower hand in hand, Collie paused in the lobby. Funny, she said, this place once felt like a glass prison. Julian looked around. Now it feels like the start of something. She smiled. It was never the tower, Julian. It was the walls you put around yourself, that you broke everyone. I spilled coffee on them first, she teased. He leaned down. You ruined my shirt, changed my life. Same day, they stepped into the rain, unafraid this time. And somewhere behind them, the revolving door spun quietly, but didn't open again, because no one was replacing her. Not ever.